What's going on, Reef Builders? I'm Jake Adams. Welcome back to another video from the Reef Builder Studio. And over the next couple of videos, I want to share with you some pro tips on how to get the most of what it is we do with our aquarium. So one of the questions that I get the most about my aquarium techniques is, what do I feed my aquarium corals? And the thing is, whether you're an Aquapora or a Lobophilia or a Sinularia, the corals don't really care what you feed them as long as it's, as long as it's nutritious. So a lot of the different aquarium products, they probably don't say this as much, but they're geared towards being easier to feed. So I've done a couple of videos of feeding corals in the wild in Papua New Guinea and in Solomons, and those are really fun. But today we're gonna bring it home to talk about feeding aquarium corals. So probably the biggest pro tip that I have for anyone that's feeding aquarium corals is to soak your aquarium foods, for, I'd say, 10 minutes at least. So a typical way to do this would be to take a small container like this, add your Reef Blizzard of choice, little amount in here, swish it around, give it like 10 minutes or so to soak, and then dose it to your aquariums. But I find that if you have one tank, that's really great, but I have a lot of tanks and I want to be able to feed more and more conveniently. So if I do a little bit more upfront work, that really helps me out. Another way to kind of automate the coral feeding is to use some kind of a feeding tube, something like this. Right? So this one is one that I've made. It's magnetic, and you would have this above the water surface and below the water surface on one side, and you can just put dry food in it, and as it becomes soaked, it will become part of the water column and go all over the place. But one of the problems with using this method right here, not a feeding ring, but a feeding tube, is eventually, if you have small fish or shrimp, they can actually go up in here and kind of eat up that food before it goes out into your aquarium. So I still use this kind of feeding tube technique on some smaller tanks for certain things. But by far, my favorite method is to make frozen food. So it's not fresh food that then I freeze. What I do is I hydrate all the different foods that I want to use, and then I freeze it into cubes. So that's what we're gonna do in this video. I only thought about it this far for the video. But as far as what I feed, I always tell everybody, I feed a giant gumbo of food, like a literal cornucopia of different ingredients. Two of my biggest, kind of like my foundation for the hardiness of the food is going to be Reefroids. Everybody's been using this forever, but to mix it up, I like to use two different sizes of Reef Blizzard. So the Reef Blizzard O is a very important component for me because it's one of the finest foods, and I really like how Reef Blizzard is separated based on particle size, so that way when I'm making these cubes of frozen, rehydrated, dry food, I can know that I'm covering the whole spectrum of particle size. And there's a few new foods from Brightwell that I started incorporating. We've got the Reef Blizzard ZR. This is the freeze-dried rotifers. We got ZC. This is freeze-dried copepods. And then we got XC, which is a little bit of a richer all-in-one food, but that doesn't stop me from mixing them all together. So what I'd like to do is actually use a Hanna magnetic stirrer to stir the food with some aquarium water. So it's really important to soak your food in tank water, because if you soak it in fresh water, the density is going to be different than your tank. It's going to be less dense, so it's going to tend to float. So make sure that you hydrate and soak your coral foods in tank water. All right, so we're gonna get this started right here. And man, there's no wrong way to do this, right? We're just rehydrating some food, making a thick slurry, and then I'm gonna pour it out into some silicone molds. These right here are hexagon. You know, you guys know I like the hexagon shape, but it gets me a lot of cubes in a small area. So you can buy these silicone molds anywhere, any size, any shape you want. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna get it started here. All right, so I wanna get like, a really nice whirlpool started up, and there is no wrong way to do it. I will literally just eyeball it. I kind of have a feel for how much I need to be adding while I'm doing this. So we're gonna add a nice spoonful of Reeferoids. There we go. You know what? I think it can go a little bit more. Really want to turn this into a slurry, so I'm doing this about 1 liter's worth is good for about 4 trays. We have some Reef Blizzard O. Again, this is really important to me because I really like that this has a lot of phytoplankton, very, very fine particles. There we go. Add a couple more. You see, there's a lot more food than you would feed to a tank at one time. So we've got some Reefroids, we got the O, we got the Reef Blizzard S, and this is kind of like the smallest particle size that's actually a particle, not just like straight dust. I'm gonna add a couple spoons there. And as this kind of top layer of food soaks, it'll start kind of falling down into the mixture. I'll add a little bit of Polyp Lab Polyp Booster just to just kind of get a little bit of a dinner bell going on, so that way when you add the food, the corals know it's time to really get their feeding going. Man, that smells so rich, almost kind of carroty. There we go. And it's really nice to know that I'm actually feeding rotifers to this aquarium. So I'm gonna add, again, another spoonful or two. Ooh, that smells good, very seafoody. There's the copepods. Again, there's nothing super specific about this. A couple spoonfuls of copepods. And then, that's my kind of my base right there, is gonna be some Reef Blizzard, some Reefroids, and some Polyp Booster. These are my standard go-to, again, Blizzard O, because it's got the really fine particles. Now, like I said, corals don't really care what you put in the food, so I'm gonna go ahead and toss. This is my opportunity to kind of add and experiment and just add some little chunks of other foods. So we're gonna put that in there, just like that. And then gonna try this new food from Elos. I haven't tried it before. Not even sure how to open it. Oh, there we go. Just gonna go like this. You know what? We're just gonna pour it up in there. There we go. Let's see how that does. And then just to kind of help it out along, I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a stir here. All right, so I got my gumbo all put together, helped it out with a little bit of a stir. You don't have to use a magnetic stirrer, but I really like just to make sure everything is very well blended. And the magnetic stirrer will come in handier while I'm loading the cubes, and I'll describe that when it's going. So we got a nice whirlpool slurry here going on. And like I said, it's more important how you feed your corals than exactly what you feed them. So we're gonna let this stir for about 30 minutes, just because I really believe in the power of hydration. So we're gonna let this sit for a little while and come back to it. All right, so the coral food has been soaking for about 30 minutes and mixing, and you don't have to use a magnetic stirrer to really get that nice homogenation of the coral particles, the coral food particles. But I like to do this, one, to maybe even break up some of those food particles, kind of break up the cells of the foods that you're feeding. But mostly, as I'm feeding, if I turn this off right now, it'll start settling almost immediately, and so I'll get a lot more food at the bottom than I will at the top. So the magnetic stirrer is really, really good for keeping everything mixed up while I'm loading up the cubes. And I just use a simple pipette. And so let's get started. All right, so it goes without saying that this is it's a little bit involved on the front end, and you kind of need to set up to do this. But if you have multiple tanks and you really care about how you feed your coral, really hydrating them as much as possible, this is one method that I have been using to basically feed my corals frozen food. And there's no reason why you can't take some actual frozen food for corals and chuck it in the mix. But yeah, I just find it really easy to pop some cubes out. And another trick that I like to do is a lot of us have mesh cream tops, so I'll just put the cube right on top of the mesh on the outflow of the return pump, so it will slowly kind of dissolves into the tank. And through the magic of television, we have one thing already frozen, and you just pop it out like that. And one thing that you'll see is that it is stratified, right? So the top is a little bit clearer than the bottom, so there's a little bit more particles in the bottom. Nothing wrong with that. And you're not gonna get a perfect blend like I'm trying to do. And it definitely goes without saying that these freeze-dried ingredients, once they're hydrated, they have a very strong, musty seafood and kind of algae extract odor to them. So make sure that you get approval and buy some ice cube trays that are for that purpose only, because the smell is, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's really strong. I will never use these to make ice cubes. So let's walk over to one of the tanks and pop a cube in and see how it works. So this is my Christmas tree worm rock tank that I've featured on a number of videos. And this is the group of animals, it's not the corals, it's these Christmas tree worms that really got me hyper focused about doing as much as I can to feed these guys. And what I like about this tank is any coral that's not doing super great or bleaching a little bit or just really requires a little bit more food. This is one tank I can put them in and feed this tank way more than it needs, and it'll just overflow into the tank behind it, feeding all those corals, and that will overflow into 600 gallons of water, feeding the entire system. So like I know that this frozen coral rehydration method is a little bit on the overkill side, but when it comes to the Reef Aquarium hobby, we all have certain aspects and certain things that we like to overdo, whether it's the lighting, the controlling, the mineral replenishment, or just fragging like crazy or collecting. We all have something that we like to do to the nth degree, and for me, this is it. So I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial on how I make frozen food for my corals. It's a really easy way to just pop out some cubes, know they're hydrated, and kind of also dose it out without having to scoop out some coral food, put it in some water, wait 10 minutes every single time that I want to feed all my tanks and all my corals. So So if you have any questions about coral feeding in general, go ahead and pop those in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not, if you want to learn more about reefing, basic and advanced techniques. Thanks you all for joining me on this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye guys.